welcome to Speak Up St. Louis.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we just really appreciate you, one, for having this exhibition here at the Contemporary Art Museum, but then also coming onto the podcast. Like we were just talking about a little bit earlier, when we're thinking about St. Louis, generally we are talking about the things that are happening here, but what we're also finding is that a lot of what is happening in St. Louis matters not just within the context of a city or county or region, but it's really looking at it in a much larger context, because the cultural fabric of St. Louis is multiple different places, multiple different peoples and backgrounds. And so to be able to have this exhibition, to have you here, adds to that conversation of what folks will be talking about here in St. Louis, whether it being directly about the work or even being about some of the topics and subject matter that you are passionate about and really wanting to express through various different mediums.
I got it. Let's go.
Yeah. So if you want to start by just, sharing with the audience and folks just who you are and, a little bit about what it is that you do.
Okay. My name is Paul Chan. If anyone knows me at all, they know me as an artist. I've been showing commercially since 2003. And the show here in St. Louis is the last version of a traveling exhibition that started at the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And the exhibition shows what I've been doing for more or less the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. And the reason why it's this range of works is that before that, I quit making art. I had quit making art because I felt like it no longer served me. I quit making art because it felt like a job. I got very lucky at the beginning of my so-called career, around the early 2000s, because I made these video animations that were projected onto special screens or on walls and then on floors. And they were very intricate. It took me a long time to make them, as anyone who makes animation knows. You spend 23 hours staring at a computer and maybe you get 10 seconds worth showing. And I was grinding them out. I loved making them. People seemed to like them. And I was lucky to have been recognized as someone worth paying attention to in contemporary art. So from the 2000s on, I traveled the world and lived that artistic life that I thought I wanted. Mm-hmm. But sooner or later, everyone realizes that's not a life at all. The carrot is a stick. And so at a certain point, I realized the thing that I was making was killing me. And at that point, I had to make a choice. Do I keep making the thing that's killing me because people like it, or do I do something else? And there are many reasons. There are many reasons we can die. There are many ways we can die. My own particular form of functional dying was that I was staring at a computer all day, and I was looking at video screens to show work. I was looking at a lot of video work, and I had enough. I couldn't do it anymore. Mm-hmm. And so I walked away. I walked away from the things that people thought I ought to be making, and I tried to figure it out in other ways.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate you sharing that, especially the level of transparency, because a lot of times folks don't share because it's one thing to talk about the success that you've had. It's another thing to actually be honest about the areas where you saw that maybe there were shortcomings or different things where you had the opportunity to be able to even recognize who you were, because it seems like at least what you were talking about is this idea of how other folks viewed you, but then also how you actually viewed and took care of yourself as well too.
I agree, and it takes practice to have that capacity, and maybe how we can describe that capacity is just a kind of honesty, at least with yourself. Mm-hmm. because, I don't know if the phrase grind culture is still around, but we all know and understand what it means to grind,
Right.
to try to make it. And for a while, as far as I can tell, it had real value. People thought it was right, and people thought you could do it if you would just grind it out. But I don't know if that's true today. I think between COVID, between millions of people dying, and the millions of others who were affected by it, not to speak of the kind of political chaos and social chaos we've lived through, with people rightly demanding more rights, more share of what it means to be an American. It's been rough. And being open to talking about how rough it is, being open about saying that I'm not doing okay, opens the door for perhaps other things to happen.
Right.
That has nothing to do with grinding it out. Because when you're grinding it out that way, you're just grinding yourself.
Right. And that's something that and I don't even know if I thought about it that way up until at least this conversation, is that idea of grinding, because with grinding, there is a sense of loss. Grinding has to come up against some type of friction, some other opposing force. And so at what point, to where it's all right, you're grinding to get to this particular place. Well, how much do you leave behind within that process? But even to what you're saying, to that openness and that transparency, hopefully for folks, it leads to that place of new self-discovery as well, too, to be able to step into the next place.
I think when you say a new form of self-discovery, I agree with you. And how I would describe that is a renewal of their full sensory capacities. Because how I think about grinding is that when you're grinding, you're working really hard to get what you're doing, to get what you want. But when you're constantly grinding, you're not renewing those sensory capacities that allow you to grind in the first place. And no one functions well when they're tired or in despair or angry. I mean, I don't know other people. I don't function well when I'm in despair or I'm debilitated with anxiety.
Yeah.
Right? But the thing is, if you keep grinding, there's no room to renew. And if there's no room to renew, the more you grind, the less grinding you do. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a job, right? It's a job, and the job grinds you, but the job doesn't give you time to renew yourself. And so your sensory capacities lessen and lessen. And when that happens, we just feel more raw. So we can't take in new input.
Or new feelings.
New ways of doing things. Right?
Feedback.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's a form of exploitation. That's how I see it. And so capacities that allow you to renew your sensory capacities is very important to me. That's why this show is called Breathers, right? Like if you don't take a breather, you're basically exploiting yourself. I don't know if I should put it in such extreme terms, but I'm not that bright and I'm kind of an extreme guy. So.
And I think even that idea of breathers, it goes against that notion, one, of grinding, but two, of just even how we understand at least this capitalist society that we live in, to where it's, you give. All right, you've given everything you got. All right, we replace the person that gave everything got with somebody else that has a fuller cup.
Yeah.
And it's a constant process of just, I guess, rinse, wash, repeat. And, we didn't take care of the first thing, so we need to put the second thing in place.
See, when you're talking, I remember when I first moved to this country. I wasn't born in America. I was born in Hong Kong. I'm an immigrant. And I moved to Omaha, Nebraska when I was 8. And I remember in 4th grade in Omaha, Nebraska, my teacher told me that George Washington slept for 2 hours a day, that Benjamin Franklin didn't even sleep. And she was making the point that they didn't sleep because they didn't need it and that they were building a great country. So what she was telling me was that in order to be great in America, to make it, you can't sleep. You got to work night and day. See, that was the message. Mm. So for years, I was sleep deprived because I wanted to be a good American. I was working constantly. And I think there are many ways to describe that. There's an immigrant work ethic, there's you just want to do good. You just want to make it. Right? But sooner or later, I realized that what my 4th grade teacher was telling me wasn't true. I mean, I don't know. Maybe Benjamin Franklin didn't sleep. It kind of seems unlikely. Right? And I think more to the point, she was talking about a kind of ideology, a kind of framework for understanding what it takes to be an American.
Right.
And what she was saying is, you have to work so hard that you lose your sensory capacities.
Right.
And maybe once upon a time in America, that rings true for people, like they were willing to live with it. But I don't think that's true today.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think that at least when I think for myself of what the pandemic did to me, because it all had different effects. But I think it also goes to what you were saying too about this. I think, let me slow down. I think the first thing that comes to mind is when you were talking about this idea of being American, as if that does not have multiple variations. It's not multifaceted. It's not diverse within even different subgroups. But then even to go on to what it feels like, I guess, for myself to be American, I think there is some anxiousness around it because it's not even sometimes about just self. It is also that idea of not only how do I make myself proud, but also how do I make others around me proud of what I've been able to succeed? And how much am I willing to put up to be able to acquire that as well too? And so, I guess I just all in all, just really resonating with what you're saying about this personal journey that you've had and being able to see the changes for yourself from your previous work in animation to now looking at the work that you're also doing here as well too. And so I guess I'm curious on, was there a moment that really stood out to you where you had that moment of self-discovery of what brought you back into the art space? Are those two very different things? Or are they kind of one and the same of that new self-discovery was also the starting point of the new body of work?
I would say that there wasn't one particular moment, but at a certain point, I felt like I had found a new reason to make art. I spent years not thinking about art. I spent years publishing books, cleaning my studio, raising a daughter. That takes up already a lot of your time. And I wasn't looking to come back. I was ready to let it go. I was ready to leave it behind. I love quitters. I think it takes courage to quit. I think it takes courage to say, I've had enough. I think it takes a lot of emotion and heart to say, no more. That's it. I'm out of here. I don't know how it feels to be an American saying that. There's certainly a yes culture here, like you should grind it out. You can do it,
You gotta see it through.
Pain and gain, you gotta see it through.
You gotta pay your dues.
Right. And I understand that spirit, But on the other hand, I think we should have a capacity to quit, to have the enough frame of mind to say, this isn't what I want. This isn't what's right. I may not be right, but this isn't right for me.
And that's okay too.
Yeah.
You know, being able to, I mean, you know, because I guess even, you know, because for some folks the idea of quitting, that like that goes against the grain, it makes them feel less than. But it's also that idea of letting go.
Yes. Yes.
Letting go.
Because sometimes the things that you're doing doesn't originate from you anyways. That forms of success that you're chasing may not have been in your design, but in someone else's design. That someone told you was worth pursuing.
Right.
Right? And what you said earlier about how chasing something like a dream or a kind of project or a thing that you want to do to make others feel proud of you, also the kind of success you may get reflects upon the community or the family you're around. I absolutely agree with you. And I would only add that an honest conversation with that circle about what success really means makes all the difference.
Right.
Because sometimes when we pursue things collectively or individually, we don't stop to ask whether those pursuits are truly within our interests, right? Or in the interest or of an image, right? It's like eating things that may be somewhat nutritious to you, but not really, right?
Yeah. It's the words that came to mind is, are we bearing a collective image of ourselves that's not even who we are? You know, so everybody else is telling us who we are, rather than us actually taking the time to acknowledge and find and refine and allow for multiple different versions of oneself. Because there's no monolith to who you are, to who I are, or anybody listening. There's who I am in this space is different than who I am at home. It's different who I am at work. And like, so I guess what's the silver lining or the thread that connects all those things to where it's, no, I know who I am despite the space that I'm in.
And that takes a sense of trust about your full sensory capacities, which depends on your capacity to renew those capacities.
For sure.
Through sleep, through very concrete, practical things.
Yeah, because that's what I was going to ask you too, is like, you know, what are some of those things that you do to restore that? Because, you know, we can talk some about the work, but I think everything that we're talking about now is showing through the work.
I think we all have different ways. Our bodies work differently. We have different histories. And so we have to come to an understanding about what works for us that will help us renew all our sensory capacities. And when I say sensory capacities, I mean things as simple as our five senses, how we see, how we smell, how we taste, how we hear, right? So one way is I wear earmuffs that deaden sounds when I travel sometimes. That's a simple way of helping my sensory capacity of hearing so that I can not feel so debilitated with noise. I keep farmer's hours. I sleep at like 8 and wake up at 5. I love it. I run for exercise and do other things. I try to spend as much time as I can with my daughter. I'm trying to raise her, and that renews me. I try to not make work that I don't like, and I'm willing to turn down shows, turn down opportunities, so that I can solely focus on things that would truly engage all of my sensory capacities. And there are a million other little things I do. I don't actually even drink anymore. It's actually after COVID. I don't even drink anymore. I wear what looks like nursing shoes. That makes it really comfortable. I'm like an old man.
Those are stylish shoes, though.
I keep my studio. I keep what I call nursing home hours. Well, I only in the studio 11 to 4, like in the times when people can visit their grandma or grandpa. You know, I'm lucky to be able to do that. But on the other hand, it limits my capacity to be in the world, to be in 10 exhibitions or 20 exhibitions, or to be in 7 art magazine articles. But I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
I left all that behind, and I'm happy to do it. Because to me, being present with anyone I'm talking to right now, including you, is better than anything else.
Wow.
To truly hear someone, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To really take in and to try to respond in a way that is full-bodied is as close to a moment worth being memorable as it gets, as far as I'm concerned.
Wow. That's super insightful, and thank you for sharing just even some of your daily routines of how you're finding ways of centering yourselves and reflecting and being able to show up in the way that you want to show up and not in the ways that you think others want you to as well. So to shift gears a little bit, because I know we're talking about a lot of things that are probably, you're not only about who you are, but also around your work as well too. It's really curious to me. I'm really curious about this idea of sound as well too, because this idea of wearing earmuffs on the plane, and then I'm like, well, then he's got these breathers that give off a very distinct noise as well too. So I guess just to kind of like, there were a couple things that came up when I was walking through the space as more high level. Was the breather stood out to me, the shoes stood out to me, and the way that you're creating space or even representing, I guess, a collection of space. Those were 3 things that really kind of came to mind. So I'd be curious if you could just touch on some of those things, the shoes, the breathers, and then the last, because being able to walk in and see the different posters and books and everything, it was like, this seems familiar, at the same time it doesn't as well too.
I appreciate you describing the works like that. I think for me, the breathers is interesting in regards to what we've been talking about with sensory capacities. And what I love about the breathers is that they're truly full-bodied experiences. Because for me, a breather, you can look at it, but I can feel them. I can feel the air in the room that's different because of the fan. I can hear them. It's not like a soundtrack to a movie, but there is sound.
Right.
And that's another sensory expression. And I like how multidimensional it is. Before I made video projections, and you look at a video on a monitor or a projection, and maybe there's sound. I suppose you can feel it, but not really. You're just looking at a screen. These animations, it's a full body experience.
Right.
And I appreciate that. I think there are a lot of different kind of works, as you said, in the show. And maybe one way to talk about that is that I'm trying to meet a moment. Like, you are who you are, and there are many facets to you. But when you meet someone or you meet a situation, you kind of have to show up and meet that moment. And there may be certain facets of you that meets the moment better than others. And that's really up to you. It's your aesthetic to understand what those facets can meet that moment most. And so sometimes you may look different, you may sound different, because you're using different facets of you to meet that moment, but you're still you. To me, these works are me meeting different materials and different moments in my life through different facets. It's like meeting different moments, and that's why they look different.
Yeah, I think even when you speak upon the breathers, you think about it, it's almost, there were a couple words that came to mind, but I think the biggest thing is that the big key thing with the animations, and I think the breathers, which at least from what I'm seeing, is that the animations are very much restricted to this one space and place. They can only live within the screen, within this projection, whereas the breathers have so much free, like, they're free. They can move how they want to move, depending on how the wind moves, depending probably on the amount of people that are in a space.
Exactly.
Depending on time of day, the weather, all these things are coming into the context that you may not even see when you're even inside of the space looking at the work. and it allows it to change depending on how it needs to change, rather than necessarily how we want it to. It doesn't do anything we want it to do. So,
Agreed. That's a great way of putting it.
okay. So yeah, and then I guess also too, there's the work that you have that is, the different posters, the books, in the way that you're kind of creating space. It was really interesting to me, one, because it's very vibrant, but then also it's very charged as well too, with some of the different conversations that you're having. And I'll be curious if you could kind of talk more about, the particular choices that were made in regards to, is this a representation of yourself, a collection of people, maybe a cultural identity as well too? Like, what were some of those different things that were coming to mind?
Well, Badlands was really my bid to try to start a business so that I don't have to sell art anymore. It failed. I loved every minute of it. And I've always wanted to publish books. But in contemporary art, books more or less means giant artist catalogs, catalogs you get at exhibitions that are heavier than a tire, that costs like $80, that no one reads. Because
they sit on the coffee table.
Yeah, they sit on a coffee table and the type is so small you can't read it anyways. And I didn't grow up reading those books, I grew up reading books that were like $10.95 that I can steal in my pocket from the airport bookstore in Omaha. Those are the kind of books I wanted to publish. And so I was lucky enough to have found people who shared that same interests, and I started a business, Badlands Unlimited, to publish those kind of books. Sort of books that talk about contemporary art and culture in a sophisticated and accessible way, but also in a way that is affordable, that you can read in New York, you can read it on a subway ride,
Right.
No one has time. I don't have time. I don't want to publish a long-ass book that you're not going to read. I want to publish sophisticated, sensitive, accessible, cheap books about art and culture. And we did it for 8 years. Right. And I was very proud of it. And so this exhibition shows virtually all of the publications that I had done. And it's a real slice of time. It's a real moment in my life when books mattered, not only as something I consumed or took in, but something I made.
For sure. Yeah, because I know when Michelle and I and Kelly and Fonz, we were all thinking about the upstairs work. And we were also thinking about some of the different conversations that you're having within your work, especially from a, voting and the political side as well too, of one making because what we wanted to come out and do is really be able to have a conversation of not just the politics itself, but more so of thinking about, how do we make sure that folks are informed, have the information, and also are having space for dialogue on what they want to be able to see in their neighborhoods. And so that's why we created the upstairs exhibition called Transform Your Hood. And so I just am curious on when you're thinking about, some of the, I guess, political context within the work, what are you hoping to accomplish? Is it more so just sharing your personal views, or is there something that you really want people to leave with? And it's okay if it's not. I'm just curious.
I want people to leave with all their belongings. I don't want them to leave missing their wallet or purse. I want them to leave with their shoes on. I want them to leave with the idea, I suppose. I hate telling people what to think or do. And so, but maybe what I'll like to say about that is I encourage people to consider the fact that all the works that are made out of common materials. Stuff you can buy on hardware store, maybe even a deli, certainly on Amazon. They're not special. They're not uncommon. They're common materials. But common materials can make remarkable uncommon things. And I find that aesthetic path more interesting than the idea of using rare or scarce or uncommon materials to do uncommon things. That's where I'm from.
For sure. And also the reason Trey and I were laughing about the leaving your belongings is because this morning I had a hard time getting out because I left my wallet and I could not find it. And so this conversation, so the fact that like you put all this emphasis on wallet, I'm like, ugh, it just stung just a little bit because I was frustrated and anxious because I'm like, I'm trying to get to Cam. I want to talk to Paul. I want to make sure I'm ready. And then I just had to tell myself, nope. It's going to be all right. Relax. Everything is going to work within the way it's supposed to.
Did you find your wallet?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So we are still on the hunt.
Okay.
My wallet is out there traveling around St. Louis, having a good time.
Man, I'm
and
sorry.
It is not where it's supposed to be, but it will show up. It will come back home eventually.
It will.
For sure. But as we're wrapping up, generally we ask folks on the podcast a more specific St. Louis question. But I think for this, it's really interesting because, this exhibition is only here for a certain time. Folks will be able to engage with it in a number of different ways. And so kind of the way that I kind of wanted to frame our final question was, as people are coming to CAM, experiencing the work in a multitude of different ways, what is either a one word, emotion, or thought that you would like for them to leave with?
Just one?
If you want to do a couple more, that's fine. I won't box you in too bad.
I appreciate that. I just have two.
For sure.
Inspired by the Persian poet Rumi. He was a 13th century poet who is a part of this Sufi lineage. And Rumi believed that the best that we can be is a being full of ecstasy and compassion. And I don't know if it gets better than that. I'm just a simple Midwestern boy. I'm just a country boy from Nebraska, so I may not know any better. But that sounds right to me.
Sounds like a pretty full life right there.
Yeah, that's a life worth living.
This has been a really great conversation, Paul. So thank you again for making the time to share with us, to share about your personal practice, and even some of the thoughts around what this exhibition is and really who you are. So thank you for being present and in the moment with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.